This is part 2 of lesson 6, course 1, lesson 6, homework review. This is part 2 of ntgreek.net, course 1, lesson 6, homework review. We're going to be looking at the online exercises now, and you were asked to translate some Greek sentences into English. Number 1, we'll look at right here. We have looking at a student's homework here. Altas gar sosetan laan autu apaton hamartion auton. I'm going to translate this and then we'll look at the student's translation. Altas gar sose. Sose is our verb. It's third person, future active indicative, sose. So it is he, she, or it will save. We have a postpositive gar. So it's second in the clause in Greek, but it'll be the first word in our English translation. And we have autos. Now, with autos, remember we need to go through kind of a flow chart of decision making here. The first question we ask, is it attributive? Is it attributive? Well, is it articular? Is it following a definite article? No, it is not. So what does that tell us? That tells us it does not mean same. Secondly, is it nominative? Yes, it is. And so what does that tell us? That tells us that we should think this is likely intensive. That is, it is an intensifier. An intensifier of what? An intensifier of the subject of the verb. What is the subject of the verb? Well, it is either he, she, or it. Sose is a third person verb, third person singular. Well, which is it? He, she, or it? Well, here, our intensifier, our autos, helps us. Because autos is masculine, we can understand that the subject of sose is masculine. So it says, for he, and then here comes the intensification, himself will save. For he himself will save the people of him from the sins of them, from their sins. Now let's look at the student's work here. Our student has, for he saved the people from their sins. Only two issues. First of all, the tense of the verb. Our student has a past tense saved. You have not learned any past tense verbs yet. You have only learned present tense and future tense, and sose is a future tense. It's from sozo. The zeta has dropped out. The sigma of the future has come in. So this is will save. And then, of course, we don't have acknowledged in this English translation from this student, we don't have the himself. It should be for he himself will save the people. I want to say a word about this function, this intensifying function of the third person pronoun. I'm going to turn in my Greek New Testament to John chapter 3 and verse 1 and illustrate the difference between saying for he himself will save and just saying for he will save. In John chapter 3, I'm just going to translate from the Greek text here. It says, as therefore Jesus knew that the Pharisees heard that Jesus is making and baptizing more disciples than John. That's a very literal translation of the first verse, but it indicates to us that Jesus is baptizing disciples. But then in verse 2 it says, Jesus autos, autos. There's our pronoun that we're talking about. Jesus is the word for Jesus. Autos is our intensifying pronoun. Uk ebaptizen. Now, you've not learned any past tense verbs, but here is a past tense verb. It means was baptizing. And what this says in verse 2 is Jesus himself was not baptizing, ahoi mathetai autu, but his disciples. So verse 1 says Jesus was baptizing, and then verse 2 says, well, Jesus himself was not baptizing, but his disciples. Obviously, Jesus' disciples are baptizing under his authority. I think you could say by his aegis or under his aegis. So Jesus, through his disciples, is baptizing. But if we want to talk about what Jesus himself is doing, he is not baptizing. And so that'll illustrate for you the significance of sometimes using an intensifier. We are calling attention to the person himself, whether he is doing something himself or rather simply doing something by the agency of someone else. Sometimes also the intensifier is used for contrast, he himself as opposed to someone else. That's another function of the intensifier. Number 2, kai ego autos anthropa. That says, and I myself am a man, or given the context from which this is taken in Acts chapter 10, it's I also myself am a man. You can translate it either way, given that we don't have the context here, and our student has translated it, and I myself am a man. That's just fine. I want you to look at this intensifier again, though. Let's make sure we understand this. Here, autos, is it attributive? No, so it doesn't mean same. Is it nominative? Yes, it is nominative. Therefore, it is an intensifier. An intensifier of what? Well, we've been saying an intensifier of the subject of the verb, but in this sentence, we don't have an explicit verb. We have a nominative ego, and we have a nominative anthropos, but no verb. So one of those is going to be our subject, and one is going to be a predicate nominative, and a verb is going to be implied. And I am a man. And then the autos will intensify the ego, and I myself am a man. All right, number 3. Let's look at number 3. Ugar en lago he basilea tu theu al en duname. I'm sorry, I pronounced that wrong. Duname. We have a negative particle up front, but we have a post-positive gar that will come first in our English translation. So we will say for not. And then the word en is the word in English, and you had a footnote to tell you that. For not in word, lago is dative case, and the reason lago is dative case here is because the preposition en always requires a dative case object. You're familiar with the idea of an object of a preposition. If I say he is in the house is a prepositional phrase beginning with the preposition in, and the word house is the object of the preposition. In Greek, we have prepositions, they have objects, and the preposition requires that object be used in a certain case, or in some instances, some prepositions take multiple cases. For en, it always takes the dative case. For not in word, the kingdom, notice he basileia is nominative. This is our subject. The kingdom of God. We don't have an explicit verb here. We have to supply the copulative. The kingdom of God is not in word. So we'll translate, for not in word is the kingdom of God, but in power. Again, duname is a third declension, which we've not studied yet, but you have a footnote telling you it means power. For not in a word of the kingdom of power, but of God, but in power, our student says. So what the student needs to do with this one is to recognize the implicit verb. Number 4. Hade autos didaskalos adze hemas estain basilean tu theu. Hade autos didaskalos. Let's get that much. De is post-positive, so we'll put that first in our English translation. But the autos, ha autos. Look at this autos. When we go through our little hierarchy, our flow chart, the questions we have to ask about autos, the first question is always what? Is it in the attributive position? Well, is it in the attributive position? Remember, de is post-positive. So even though ha is not immediately preceding autos, autos is articular. The ha goes with autos, and autos therefore is in the attributive position. And so here it means same. If we took the de out of the clause, we would have, and let's just do that. Let's just take the de out of the clause. Now what do we have here? We have three words: ha, autos, didascalos. Definite article, adjective, noun. That's classic attributive position. You say autos is a third person pronoun. Well, yes, but when it is in the attributive position, it is an adjective meaning same. So here, autos is masculine nominative singular to agree with didascalos, which it modifies. This phrase means the same teacher. And then we have agze, which is future active indicative, third person singular of ago. It means will lead. Then we have the accusative form of the first person plural pronoun, hemas. And so this is the object of the verb. The same teacher will lead us, eistain basilean tu theou, into the kingdom of God. Let's see how our student did. And the same teacher will lead us in the kingdom of God. If it had meant in the kingdom of God, you probably would have had the preposition in here. You don't know that yet, but you were told, I think you had a footnote, maybe you didn't have a footnote here, but eis means into. There are some instances where in is an appropriate translation for eis. Here, better into. So that's really a good job by this student. Number 5, autos gar legetus autus lagus autois kai hemin. All right, well, we've got a post-positive gar here. That will come first in our English translation, for. Then we have autos lege. Lege is our third person, present active indicative, third person singular verb. He says, or she says, or it says. Autos, is it attributive? No, so it does not mean same. Is it nominative? Yes, so we're going to suppose it is an intensifier. Intensifying what? The subject of the verb. Lege is the verb. What's the subject? He, she, or it. But autos is masculine, so we will understand the subject to be masculine. For he himself says. And then tous, autus, lagus, all dative case, attributive construction. This time, notice that autos, and here we have the accusative plural, autus, is in the attributive position. We have definite article, then autus, then the noun. So here it means same. For he himself says the same words. And then we have autois, which is dative plural. So that's our indirect object. Our direct object is lagus in the accusative case. Indirect object, autois, which we can translate as a prepositional phrase beginning with the word to. For he himself says the same words to them. And then we have a second indirect object. Again, dative case. This is the first person pronoun, dative case plural form, hemin, and it means to us. For he himself says the same words to them and to us. So our student is translated, for he spoke in the same words for them and to us. I really can't argue with the for them too much. In some contexts, we will translate the dative case using the for, so that's fine. Our student has correctly recognized same is how we should translate autus in the attributive position. We need to get the intensifier autos acknowledged in our English translation. So we need it to say for he himself, and she has translated lege spoke instead of said, and that would be all right. But we have in the same words, and there's really no call for adding the preposition in our English translation. That changes the meaning. If we look back at the Greek, tous, autus, lagus is accusative. That's the direct object. It's not dative. It's not talking about the means by which he spoke. It's telling us what he spoke. For he himself spoke or said the same words, not in the same words. All right, number 6. Genoskamen unta auta. This is, therefore we know the same things. And our student has then we know her. Well, all right, first of all, une may be translated then or therefore as postpositive, so that much is fine. The we know is fine. Genoskomen does mean we know. The thing that we need to work on is the ta, auta. Auta. It looks like our student has taken that and construed it as a feminine, but what you need to notice here is the definite article ta. That is unambiguously a neuter form. That is not a feminine form. Remember, in the singular feminine forms of the definite article, we see an eta, not an alpha. This is a plural neuter form, and so is auta. So what do we have here? Well, we have the third person pronoun in the attributive position. You see, it's immediately preceded by the definite article ta, and so it's in the attributive position, so it means same. But it is also used substantively. That is, there is no noun out here after the definite, after the adjective auta. Here it's functioning as an adjective, meaning same. And there is no noun. But we need to supply noun to acknowledge the fact that the Greek ta auta is neuter and plural. And so, how do we do that? Well, we can use the word things. Things lets us know that we're not talking about a person. If it had been a person, we would have seen masculine or feminine here. And it is plural, and things, plural, accomplishes that. So, therefore, we know the same things. That's how we should translate this. All right, we'll pause there. And in the third part, we'll do the English to Greek.